Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. So I have two young daughters back in Washington, D.C., one who is 3.5 and the other who is 1.5. And recently I was putting my 3.5-year-old daughter, Hadley, to bed, and she had noticed that I was wearing a sweatshirt from my undergraduate college, my undergraduate school, Ithaca College. And she said, "Daddy, what does that spell?" And I told her, it spells Ithaca College, and she said, "What is college?" It's a profound question coming from a 3.5-year-old, and one, to be honest with you, that's increasingly being asked by parents, students, prospective students, policymakers, and college leaders across the country. As college tuition continues to increase, as student debt continues to increase, and as a variety of forces converge on higher education, demographic, financial, and of course technological. So I had to answer her, of course, and she's in preschool, so I explained to her that college is a lot like her school, but for older students. Of course, as I was telling her this, I realized that she probably has a lot more opportunities to explore and to have fun, to be honest with you, in preschool than most students have in college these days. After I put her to bed, though, I started to think a little bit more about this question and think about the variety of answers I could give to somebody who asked this question. And so I decided to turn to one of my favorite sources as a writer for information, the dictionary. And I said, I wonder what the dictionary says about college. And here is what the American Heritage Dictionary says about college. The first definition is an institution of higher learning that grants the bachelor's degree in the liberal arts or science or both. So the dictionary definition thinks of college as a physical place. And the question being asked right now about this definition, about the physical college, is whether we can afford to sustain the physical place, and whether, given the advancements in technology, we need to sustain the physical place in order to have learning at the college level. You know, a college has many purposes: research and discovery, maturing students, and of course, at its core is in the information delivery. And in recent years, a number of industries in the information delivery business, that could be music, journalism, and books, have been transformed by technology, resulting in the decline of the middleman in all those industries: newspapers, record stores, and of course, bookstores. And the question is now, the question now is whether colleges are next. Are they the next information delivery business to be disrupted like these others? And if you think of college as a physical place, like the dictionary does, then the fact of the matter is that colleges will probably evolve over time, just like cities evolve over time. We've had cities for centuries, and we will have colleges for centuries. But if you think of college more akin to the publishing industry, for example, where the only necessary people in the publishing process are the writer and the reader, if you think of college as really where the only necessary people in the room are the teacher and the learner, then the question becomes whether we need the physical place in order to sustain higher education as we think of it today. You know, before the newspaper and the music and the book industry was disrupted in the last 10 years, there was a well-organized system of players in this ecosystem. Think about the big six music companies, Sony Music. Think about newspapers such as the New York Times and the Washington Post. And of course, think about publishing, Simon & Schuster and Random House. You know, all those iconic brands still exist today, but there are many more players in all of those industries, some of which have displaced the incumbents, and some which have joined the incumbents next to them and have sliced off a piece of their business. This is increasingly happening in higher education today. You know, when we think about higher education in the United States today, we no longer have a common definition of what we mean by it. But back in the 1940s, we thought of higher education as educating the returning GIs from World War II. In the 50s and 60s, we thought of it in terms of the race to space. In the 70s and 80s, it was about kind of competing in the Cold War. But in recent years, we don't really have that common definition of higher education in the United States anymore. And as a result, what you're seeing now is a number of new players entering the ecosystem of higher education. So you have the Khan Academy. And in research for my book, you can't go into a middle school and high school today and not hear from a student who has been helped by the Khan Academy, which now reaches 4 million people a month with its short videos. You have Western Governors University, which is growing by 40% a year with its model of competency-based education, which measures education, or measures learning by time, by what you know rather than time spent in a seat. And now is the largest provider, by the way, of urban school teachers. And of course, you have places like Coursera and edX, which barely existed a year ago. And Coursera now has over 200 courses, over 2 million students have taken its courses, and it has over 30 university partners. And so the question is, where does this shift in higher ed? Where do all these new players, where does this shift leave the traditional residential liberal arts college campus like we're on today? There's a lot of discussion about value in higher education today and about the value of higher education. And much of that value centers around college majors and what students are getting out of college. You might recall when you were first asked what you wanted to do when you grow up. We almost asked this question from the time somebody is in elementary school. I remember I did an autobiography in elementary school, and I said I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Well, we all know how that turned out. And you're asked through middle school, and then of course in high school you're asked if you want to go to college, and then the second question always is, well, what do you want to major in? And then of course you get to college, and you're identified by your major. It's usually the first question you get is, what is your major? And I think about it, if we all went back to what we wanted to be when we were 5 or 6 years old, we'd probably have way too many astronauts, baseball players, football players, doctors and nurses than we need today. So the idea is, perhaps we should be asking more, instead of what is your major, whether majors matter and whether we're putting too much emphasis on majors today. Sure, somebody who is going to become an engineer, for example, needs to major in engineering. But the fact of the matter is that there are very few majors that really lead to very specific technical careers. Yet we've seen this huge increase in the number of academic programs on college campuses today. Everything from sustainability to sports management. Indeed, 2 out of every 5 academic majors that are on the government's list of academic majors it tracks didn't exist in 1990, 2 out of 5. And in fact, there's been a 21% increase in the number of academic majors in the US just in the last 10 years. So the fact of the matter is that students are starting to move into these individualized majors. And one of the discussions we should be having is whether majors matter. So students don't think of majors as a life sentence to remain with a career, but as a menu of choices where they can change their mind and add a side dish. There's a lot of discussion right now about the return on investment to certain majors. Major in STEM fields instead of anthropology, as the governor of Florida recently said. But the fact of the matter is that students think of majors as fungible. So when students are asked, 9 in 10 say they want an interesting major no matter how practical it is. This comes from a survey that is done every fall among college freshmen. 1 in 4 college freshmen will change their major by the end of their year. And they want a lot of flexibility. And in fact, on many campuses, a quarter of students now are double majoring because they want to add additional skill sets to what they're doing. Students have always had information about what they earn in terms of majors, and we've been seeing a lot of this recently, again, in terms of this ROI argument. And I majored in journalism in college, even though I knew it didn't pay well, because I wanted to be a journalist. And the fact of the matter is that even if students are getting more information about college majors and about how much money they're going to make as college majors, the fact of the matter is that students are still deciding to go into interesting majors no matter how practical they are. So if students see majors as fungible, except in a few specialized fields, what if we started defining colleges around a set of experiences rather than majors? And so there are 4 experiences that I think that colleges should start defining themselves around. And the first is seek passionate faculty. We know from research that many of the students that I talked to in the research for my book said that they picked their major because of the faculty that were in that department, not necessarily because of the discipline. And so we know from research that students who get to know faculty members one-on-one over the course of their undergraduate career are going to have a much better chance of succeeding. And so the idea of building the experience around faculty rather than individual disciplines or individual majors. Dive deep into a research project. Places like this, of course, value undergraduate research. We should be spreading that around the country and around other institutions. The fact of the matter is that some institutions offer a capstone experience. Why should that be just reserved for the senior year? Why shouldn't it be in the freshman and the sophomore year? When you talk to employers, they really value students who did undergraduate research, mainly because it stimulates critical thinking, gives students a better understanding of what they learned from a lecture, and allows them to work in group situations with uncertain results. Go on a global experience. Many more students now are obviously studying abroad, and when you look at the research on study abroad, more and more students talk about how that was a critical experience in their undergraduate career. But the fact of the matter is that it's increasingly becoming expensive to study abroad. So the idea is, could we create more cross-cultural experiences for students, whether it's just within the United States or even shorter experiences overseas? And then finally, creating spaces on college campuses to be creative, take risks, and learn how to fail. When I was thinking about that question that my daughter asked me about what is college, I started to think about the fact that in preschool, she has a lot more opportunities to be creative, take risks, and learn how to fail. As colleges have added a lot of amenities over the last 10 or 20 years, and as they've added more and more people to guide students through college, there's a lot more hand-holding now through college than there was even when I went to college 20 years ago. And as you talk to employers today, they think that students don't have enough skills in the idea of creativity, they're afraid to take risks, and they don't know how to fail. And so we should be putting this into the DNA of every institution. What's the other thing that you notice about all of these experiences? They can't be easily replicated on the internet or online. These are experiences that really need to be done on a residential campus much like this. But they don't necessarily need to be performed within 4 years or within the confines of a degree program. You know, we think of college as a place you go to 3 months after high school graduation. You start there in September, you end their first year in May, and you're there for 4 years, hopefully. But we think of this as kind of a confined experience. And if we focus less on majors and more on experiences, my belief is that we can start blending the experiences between high school and college and the workforce. Many of the issues that students face today are around these transition points. Many of the places where they're struggling today are on the transition point between high school and college. That's where many students are dropping out, and between college and the workforce, where they're struggling to launch. And in fact, many of the entrepreneurs that I meet that want to disrupt higher education are looking at these areas between high school, college, and transition to work. So we have ventures like Venture for America, which is placing recent college graduates in startups and is modeled after Teach for America, or Institute, which is now taking students and putting them in apprenticeships even at the age of 18 and building a curriculum around it. But in my opinion, colleges should not cede this ground to entrepreneurs. They should be thinking about how they can better blend the experience between high school and college and the transition to work. But as I've traveled around the country in the last year and a half, particularly in research for my book, I've realized that despite our talk of a diverse higher education system, many colleges indeed look alike. You know, we have the campus quad, the neo-Gothic buildings, and the fall football weekends. We have this very romantic vision of what American higher education is. And in many ways, it's a Hollywood vision that exists to me only in the movies. Because in reality, higher education is not living up to its promise. If you ask researchers have asked students, and only 1 in 5 of them say they have a solid idea on what they want to do in life. 4 in 5 are drifting. A third of students now transfer institutions at least once before they graduate. And 400,000 students drop out. So we might say that the current higher education system is working, but in reality, it's not necessarily working the way we think it is. Now, you talk to college officials and you ask them, well, why can't you change? Why can't you move away from majors and think more about experiences? Or why can't you blend the idea between high school and college and the workforce? And the fact of the matter is that they want to look like other institutions. Because in American higher education, it's really about this prestige race. Prestige in higher education is like profit to corporations. And as a result, everybody wants to look like the institution ahead of them, or down the road, or the institutions that they compete against. And so as a result, we have very little innovation in higher education. In fact, most of the innovation is around the edges. And so when you ask a college president, when you ask why don't you think about reorganizing around experiences instead of majors, they don't want to look different than the institution that they're competing with for students, or the institution across town. We are in real need in American higher education for new ideas and to think differently about the way American higher education is delivered. But the fact of the matter is that as long as the prestige race matters more in higher education than serving the students, we're not going to have that. But the fact of the matter is, in my opinion, that we need that in order to sustain the physical campus. And if we are going to ask this question in 20 years and we want the physical university to be here, then we are going to need to think in different ways about American higher education. Thank you so much for your time today.